Yo everybody, this is Alpha and it's the month of October, the best month of the whole year. I love it, it's so spooky and everything is just amazing, great. And since it's October, I decided to make a video about it. Not October, but a video game. I do have 2 things planned, except this, but I don't know if I have enough time to actually do them. Hopefully I will make at least one more, so stay tuned for that if you like Halloween. Anyway, the video game is Soma. This video is part of a series where I recommend different video games unrelated to their release date. This isn't a review, but more like a suggestion of a video game that I think deserves more recognition. Also, I'll try to avoid spoilers as much as possible, but the video will contain early spoilers about the beginning of the game, and it will include some footage spoiler too. Now, Soma is a game that left me in existential dread. On so many levels, this is a game made out of genius and deep thought. I happened upon the game during a sale on the PlayStation Store in October, I think, around Halloween. We were searching for a game to play and this popped up. I started playing through it with those friends and in the end we were all left in awe and some of us in despair. I always expect to get something out of every video game I play, but I could never expect that Soma would be this good. It's like I paid for a spongy hamburger at McDonald's and the waiter frisbees me a plate with the best damn steak that ever existed since the Big Bang. Kinda like that, but not really. Soma was developed by Frictional Games. Yes, the very same people that made the acclaimed Amnesia series. I always like to praise developers who's smart and grateful to their fans and who doesn't charge $60 for a game at release. Soma only cost $29.99 and in 10 days the game sold 92,000 copies and received critical acclaim from many different sites and reviewers. The game itself starts off rather slow, with a long introduction to the game world and our main character, Simon Jarrett, who recently was involved in a car crash that killed a close friend of his, as evidenced by a series of events in the beginning of the game. Due to the car crash, Simon was left with brain damage, so he's going to a doctor that's doing research on a new treatment that may resolve the damage that Simon sustained from the car crash. The game starts off in Toronto, Canada, and after the brain scan, he wakes up in an unknown location with strange machines and human bodies lying around. At that particular moment, not much makes sense, but it will soon enough. That cut from Toronto to a place called Pathos 2, an underwater facility, is instantaneous and will be very meaningful later on. It's a neat little detail, but also very important. Simon soon encounters an NPC by the name of Catherine, who fills him in on why he's underwater and the story up until that point, while also giving Simon a meaningful goal to achieve. The introduction to the game is honestly pretty weak, but it sets up the rest of the story perfectly. And I won't spoil it, but the brain scan is mostly what the game's whole story is built upon. Simon also has the unique ability to data mine, I think, certain logs and dialogues that happened before the start of the game, which will largely serve as a way to uncover portions of the backstory in the game. Since the game is set underwater, Frictional Games often incorporate a very thematic and fitting style in their design. The buildings is starting to become a part of the sea itself, and whenever you move outside of the base you can feel how vast the sea is. The graphics are also very fitting, but it's not the best looking game either. What makes it look good is the lighting, coherency and other effects. There are so many objects to examine and find, and so many little details that speaks 1,000 words if you pay attention, and they will probably take up a large chunk of the game time. Sometimes you'll also come across difficult situations where a decision has to be made. I won't say much more than that, but it can be truly devastating. Now, Soma is categorized as a horror game, but it doesn't rely on the cheap jump scares as much as it relies on atmosphere, uneasiness and the narrative itself. But there are still some jump scares in the game. like this one.
You don't want me?
Yes, of course, but what happened?
They fell in love.
This is unusual for a horror game, but it's perfect when Soma is structured like it is. The game will stay with you after completing it, because you will need to think about the questions that were asked during the game. This is also a game in which you cannot protect yourself directly, so you'll have to use your wits to outsmart the AI from chasing and catching you. Or you can be like me, go and cry whenever you see a monster. The game progression is somewhat slow every now and then, depending on how quick you solve Soma's puzzles and how quick you understand where to go next. The gameplay is simplistic, and it's unfortunately also one of the weaker aspects of the game. Luckily, the story, characters and the horror elements makes up for that. Exactly like in Amnesia, you can pick up, throw and drag objects, and you can also interact with computers and other objects too. Thankfully, the enemies are varied and actually feels different. Unfortunately, you can't really die, and if you do, you'll only respawn at a nearby checkpoint, so this may not be a game for the ultimate hardcore gamers, since it doesn't feel like a real punishment. One of the highlights in Soma, in my opinion, is the sound design and the sound itself. The sound effects feels like a natural part of the game, as they should. Crackling electricity, heavy metallic footsteps and unearthly noises is some of the sounds you'll come across. The voice acting is spectacular. It had to be good in this type of game, where it's mainly two characters driving the story forward. However, the quality of the voice acting flew way above my expectations. Whenever you date mine terminals and recordings, it feels like you're actually listening to a recording, which is very impressive. Simon and Catherine both sounds good, and you can hear the anger, sadness and melancholy in their voices whenever they speak. Catherine is on a whole other level. She is the NPC which lifts Soma to new heights. Only by hearing her voice and story, she incrementally becomes more and more human, or at least more real. There is just something charismatic in her voice that makes her feel more alive. Mikko Tarmia, I hope I didn't butcher that name, is the genius behind the very simplistic but beautiful soundtrack in Soma. She often uses a piano and other ethereal sounds to make soundtracks that fit Soma's setting and surroundings. It gives me a feeling of something that's so obvious but still hard to grasp. Sometimes you'll hear soothing slow strings and synths, and other times you'll think that you're in a nightmare when you hear the horrific ambient soundtracks that's meant to get you tense. And then we have the story. The story is what makes this game a masterpiece in my book. And it's what makes the experience that memorable. Soma's story brings up a topic that's becoming more and more relevant in today's society. They ask the player questions about the individual self, our consciousness. What makes something living? What makes us human? Throughout the whole game, the game itself will ask you these questions, both indirectly as well as directly. And these questions becomes harder and harder to answer as you progress through the game. If someone can store a person's data on a computer or in another similar object, can that person really live forever? Does that count as a person? These are some of the questions that you can expect to hear in the game, but it becomes so much more profound. The ending, without spoiling too much, is perfect for this type of game. You know, I've never really liked the deep dark sea and whatever may lurk in the depths of it, and Soma only enhanced that feeling even more. On the surface, I'm so funny, I know. Soma may just seem like another half-assed indie game, but beneath the surface, it's so much more. I almost feel bad for not speaking more about this masterpiece or its story, but I don't want to steal away the experience for you if you decide to play it anytime. This is truly a hidden gem among video games, and I really hope you have the time and the money to play this masterpiece. I don't have a special type of seal or something to issue it, but I will say this. This is a game you have to experience, either by yourself or with some friends, if only to engage in discussion after you beat it. It will leave you with a love for life, an appreciation of what it means to be a human or have a consciousness. There aren't many games that achieve so much with so little. The game has its flaws, it does, but Soma elevated beyond the borders of storytelling in my book. It etched itself into the depths of my mind, and since I completed it, Soma has never left it, and it never will.